Distinguished guests, please welcome to the stage Wings Over the Rockies President and CEO, John Barry.
Good evening. Well, tonight we welcome all to this, what we call Wings of Valor, honoring veterans from all services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard, and all ranks. And I have the privilege of introducing some of our distinguished guests this evening. Again, please a round of applause for Dee Dee for the national anthem. What a great time. First, I'd like to introduce General Ron Fogelman. He's going to be introduced a little bit later because he's our guest speaker. But as the 15th Chief of Staff of the Air Force and our guest speaker, further introductions later. But General Fogelman, please stand and be recognized. Okay. We are delighted also to have another Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the 13th Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Mike Dugan and his wife, Grace. General Dugan, you good? And I think it's important to go through a little bit of the history of some of our guests tonight. So, General Dugan had 300 sorties in the war, Silver Star, Distinguished Flag Cross, Purple Heart, Air Medals, tour dates. He flew the A-1 during Vietnam at Pleiku. He also was at Nakhon Phanom, Thailand in 1967. So, General Dugan, thank you for joining us tonight. Next one to introduce is General Greg Martin and his daughter Tracy. Greg, Speedy, stand up please, sir. You good? Former Air Force Material Commander and Youth Safety Commander, 4,600 hours. His combat time, which I think is good for us to be able to go through tonight, 161 sorties, Distinguished Flag Cross, Air Medals with 11 Oak Leaf clusters. His tour dates were in the F-4 when he flew from October 1972 to June 1973. General Speedy Martin, thank you. We're also privileged to have here General Mike Holmes, former Air Combat Command, and also the Air Force Historical Foundation chairman. Now, Mike has got 4,000 hours. He also had a lot of combat time, but in the Middle East, not in Vietnam. But 530 hours, Bronze Star, Air Medal with 3 Oak Leaf clusters. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Holmes. Now, we are truly delighted tonight to have Captain Mike McGrath. Mike was an A4C pilot, combat sorties 179 for the U.S. Navy. Also, captivity as a POW, 2,075 days, and earned his Silver Star while he was a POW. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me and stand up if you would. Captain Mike McGrath. As being part of the Air Force Historical Foundation, I also am delighted to introduce Jonah Doolittle Hops, who's the president of the Air Force Historical Foundation. You can clearly tell by the Doolittle name that she is the granddaughter of Jimmy Doolittle. Please. Jonah, good. Now, some of you know, of course, we're at a second site here for the Wings Over the Rockies Museum, but really, the Air Force Academy started at Lowry Air Force Base. That's our first site. So we're always delighted to be able to continue to maintain the legacy we have with the Air Force Academy. You know, it started in 1955 to 1958. So let me introduce Lieutenant General Mike Gould and his wife, Paula, the former superintendent of the Air Force Academy and now the CEO of the United States Air Force Association of Graduates. Mike? Also, I'd like to introduce Major Mike Edwards. He's a classmate of mine, turns out, former State Adjutant General and Commander out at Buckley Air Force Base. Certainly a privilege to have he and his wife, Lori. So, Mike, you're already out there. I know you're out there somewhere. Raise your hand. There you go, Mike. Palmer. Got a few other people I'd just like to recognize. Brigadier General Paul Tibbets, retired Air Force Board. Retired Air Force General, but also part of the Air Force Historical Foundation. General, good to see you. We're going to General Jim Johnston, a friend of Charlie Johnson, he'll be speaking here. He's our chair for the museum. But I'd like to have General Johnston stand up. Thank you. I didn't really see him, but is Sylvan Fabi in the audience tonight? Okay. But we also have Representative Brian Armagast, who is House District 64 and a veteran. So, Mike, where are you? Brian, good to see you. Good. Always I'd like to introduce my bride, Ellen. Ellen, stand up, please. Be good. All right, well, this is the fun part of the introduction. So let me see the cadets from CS 28. Raise your hand. Good. So what we do is to maintain the legacy of the Air Force Academy with Lowry and, of course, Wings Over the Rockies. What we do is we select a cadet squadron each year. The Commandant actually selects the squadron, and they get to be free members. They fly in our airplanes. They be able to use our simulators. They're invited to events like this. So when I say Cadet Squadron 28, I want to hear what? All right, good. You guys got the right answer. We also are privileged to have the ROTC from up in the Boulder and CU area. So where's the ROTC from the CU? Raise your hands. Be good. So when I say ROTC, I want to hear what? Good. All right. Now I have a special introduction tonight that is near and dear to all of our hearts who sit on the board, and that's to recognize Colonel Ron Smith. Now Ron was at the beginning of the museum on the board. He was the CEO for a while. He was the chairman of the board. He was an RF 101 pilot in Vietnam in 1965 and earned the Silver Star as a special tribute to someone who's been a longtime member of Wings Over the Rockies Museum. Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Ron Smith. So tonight, most important of all are our veterans from the air war in Vietnam, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. So ladies and gentlemen, while the greeting wasn't necessarily the best when you came back, welcome back. And welcome back to all our Vietnam veterans. So as we play each service song, I ask those who were certainly in the service with that group, either because of your family association with the particular service. So all family members invited to stand and to be recognized with their respective song. Please play the anthems for all of our services. Stand up, everyone in the Army. That'll get your blood going for the evening. You're good. I do want to mention that as you see on the tables that are situated, we have the agenda for tonight, but also some QR codes. And those QR codes are for Vietnam veteran organizations. I invite you to capture that QR code, maybe select one you want tonight, but also know that part of the proceeds tonight will be going to our veterans organizations tonight. So now it's my pleasure to introduce somebody who is very close to me and also is our chairman at our board at Wings Over the Rockies. Let me tell you before he comes up a little bit about Charlie Johnson. First of all, Charlie Johnson flew the F-105 in Vietnam. He flew over 1,000 hours in the Wild Weasel. Combat sorties, over 100. Combat time, over 600 hours. Tour dates, September 71st until August 1972 in Korat, Thailand. In February of 1972, he flew 101 hours in 1 month, and is a member of what we call the Millionaires Club. So at that time, they were shooting AGM 78s, which were $250,000 a piece. So as soon as you shot 4, you were part of the Millionaire Club. Very good. And he also flew as part of the special similar missions that we're going to talk a little bit more about tonight, Operation Bolo. So ladies and gentlemen, a dear friend, great leader, board chair, Charlie Johnson. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of our board of directors of Wings Over the Rockies, I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to this fabulous evening. I also am going to back up a little bit. We have a couple of dignitaries. General Mason Whitney, please stand up. General Whitney was Adjutant General for the state. He snuck in the back door. And then we can't let all the Academy cadets get good recognition. I've got a bunch of seniors right here who I've had the pleasure of knowing and sponsoring. So guys, please stand up. They represent more of our Academy folks. One thing that John asked me to do when I came up here, he said if the crowd gets a little slow, a lot of people will notice what you're saying right now and watch how much everybody tenses up. I've got a 2-word phrase that I'm going to say. And until I get clearance from John, I'm not going to say the second, but watch some of the reactions. If I say the word dead, no, he said not to do it. And my job tonight is to basically thank everybody for being here. Thanks for your tremendous support of our military. Thanks for your support of Wings Over the Rockies. Thanks to the Air Force Historical Foundation for putting this wonderful evening together and bringing us all together. And we couldn't do it without a bunch of outstanding sponsors. The Air Force Historical Foundation, which I mentioned earlier, 505 Southwestern, we got some phenomenal news coming up in a partnership that we're doing with them right now. Denver International Airport, the Anschutz Foundation, Aspen Aviation have helped us give scholarships and train over 100 students through Wings Over the Rockies in flight careers. Bell Flight, obviously Bell Helicopters, a wonderful supporter. The Dedalians, an Air Force organization of aviators. El Pomar, a facility down in Colorado Springs that supports everybody. The United States Air Force Academy Foundation, and then United Services Automobile Association. So they are all tremendous sponsors, and please join me in thanking them. We also have had some pretty incredible support from individuals stepping up to the plate. General James Holmes, General Barry contributed, Stuart Walton, Connor McCallan, Jack Thompson, Tony Mayer, and Tony also helped us with transportation for some of our dignitaries coming in here. Tim Ryan, Greg Anderson, the CEO that preceded John, and Lynn Crow, who is a strong supporter of both our airport and all of our facilities. So thanks to all of you also. The other thing is, don't blink while I'm up here. John told me I had 3 minutes, and I managed to squeeze it down into 5. But I'd like to also thank the tremendous staff that we have at Wings Over the Rockies for putting this together, the beautiful facility we have, and all that's going on this evening. So thanks to the Wings staff and volunteers. So technically, and John really keeps a tight leash on me, technically I've done everything I'm supposed to say. But I really couldn't let a night go by like this without saying what I'm going to just, the wonderful people that we have in our military today. I'm going to go kind of today, I'm going to go future, and then I'll talk a little bit about Vietnam. But today also the beautiful F-16 out there. We have got people in our services, men and women, that are dedicated to our country, and our country is in phenomenal hands. I don't think we've had a better military. Good people, wonderful people. The cadets that we have right now, the ones that I've gotten to know and being down at the academy, the folks that are at Colorado University and ROTC, the people we run into, young people, young engineers, parents, and things like that. Our future in our country is beyond incredible, and we just can't let ourselves get drugged down by the negativity. And I can't stress that enough. You look at these young people, they're as dedicated, they're as patriotic, they love our country, they're as hardworking as any people I've ever met in my life. So all you young folks who are getting ready to graduate, thanks for carrying forward for us. We appreciate it. And I can't get off the stage quite for about 1 or 2 minutes about Vietnam. I don't know how many of you noticed, and I pointed this out to a number of people. If you looked at those pictures, no matter how severe the combat was, no matter how tough a day was, everybody's smiling. You all gave us the chance when we went over there to serve our country with a lot of pride. And basically, it's pretty incredible. And I think any one of us, and I think I can speak for all the Vietnam pilots, aircrew members, supporters that are in the crowd tonight, that's something any of us would go back and do the next day. And again, I can only thank you and say how much we appreciate the opportunity that you gave us, and the recognition that you're giving everybody tonight is pretty incredible. So thank you all very much. I am going to probably leave the stage here and turn it back over and get some professional entertainment for you. So thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Very good. Actually, I gave him 10 minutes. He only took 4, but they're good. Well, it is now my pleasure to introduce our partner for the last couple of days. The Air Force Historical Foundation has done an excellent symposium on Saturday and Sunday. And also, it was part and parcel of reminiscing a little bit about what went on 50 years ago when we left Vietnam. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, and then I've asked the Navy here to ring the bell for those who served and served well. So today, we gathered to pay tribute to the brave souls who took to the skies during one of the most challenging and defining periods in the Vietnam War. These gallant men and women, pilots and crew members, support NCOs on the ground who flew in the Vietnam War, exhibited unparalleled valor, resilience, and certainly from the standpoint of commitment in the face of adversity. Now, the Vietnam War was tumultuous. We know that it was divisive, a conflict that tested the mettle of those who served. In the midst of political unrest, certainly from the standpoint of social upheaval, and these aviators rose to the occasion, they embodying the spirit of selflessness and duty. They left the comforts of home and family, heading to a foreign land to confront an elusive enemy and defend the principles of freedom and democracy. The skies over Vietnam were unforgiving, and the challenges faced by these pilots were numerous. They flew dangerous missions, often facing intense anti-aircraft fire and surface-to-air missiles. The enemy lurked in the shadows, making every flight a life and death struggle. Yet, with unyielding courage, each and every one of them, they soared through the skies, refusing to be deterred by the fear and danger that surrounded them. The aircraft that they flew were amazing. For the time, they became the wings of valor. And their comrades in arms became their second family. They formed an unbreakable bond, relying on each other for support and survival. The camaraderie that was shared, we can see it even in the room today, shared among these courageous men and women amplified their determination, providing and proving that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can triumph over adversity. They endured harsh conditions and unimaginable stress, yet they pressed on, driven by the sense of duty and honor. Many of them returned home with physical and emotional scars, yet they carried with them a pride that sustained them, and in their service that could not be diminished. So let us not forget that for every pilot who took to the skies, there were countless others behind the scenes, working tirelessly on the ground to be able to support that effort. The ground crews, the mechanics, the support personnel were instrumental in ensuring the aircraft were ready for action, often under very difficult times. Their dedication and expertise played a vital role in the success of every mission, and the valor of those who flew in Vietnam extends far beyond the battlefield, even to today. Their service inspired a nation to reflect on the cost of war and to honor the sacrifice of those who served. They taught us the importance of unity, resilience, and the enduring human spirit. Their legacy lives on. Your legacy lives on, reminding us of the true freedom that we all cherish and the courage required to defend it. In conclusion, we owe a debt of gratitude to the brave aviators, crews on the ground who flew in Vietnam and worked on the ground, up to including April 1975, when we had the Mayaguez incident. We know what happened in March of 1975, when the helicopter lifted off in Vietnam. Unwavering dedication was evident. They left indelible marks on history in our hearts. Let us forever honor their memory. Let us remember the 2.7 million Americans, servicemen and women, who served in Vietnam. Let us remember the 58,220 American servicemen and women who died in Vietnam. Let us remember the 1,584 American servicemen and women still missing in action. And let us remember all those who are POWs, the 55 who died in captivity and the 591 servicemen who returned in 1973. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thanks to our select chiefs, both of them are select chiefs in the Navy here, depending on here shortly. Thank you very much for bringing that incredible opportunity for us to share tonight. So now it's my pleasure to invite General Mike Holmes to come on up. He's the chair again of the Air Force Historical Foundation, leading the charge on our symposium with the great team that we have evident here. So, ladies and gentlemen, General Mike Holmes.
Distinguished guests, please welcome to the stage General Mike Holmes, Air Force Historical Foundation Chair, to present AFHF Awards.
Okay, thank you, John, for sharing this event with us. We completed a symposium this weekend in Denver where we looked at the Vietnam War. Our job is to help remember. So again, thanks, Chief Selects, for reminding us all to remember those that came before us. As John said, I was commissioned in '81, so I'm not a Vietnam veteran, but the squadrons that I joined in 1981 were led by veterans of the Vietnam War. And they made sure we had the equipment that we needed to deter a fight with Russia and to fight the global war on terrorism. And they taught us how to train, and they taught us how to get ready to fight. So the Air Force that I joined remains in their dead. Our capstone event, again, looked at the Vietnam War, and we're honored to share this symposium tonight with you by looking at some of our award winners and to share this event that honors Denver's veterans of the air war. I need to talk about our sponsors briefly. The Super Sabre Society with over 1,800 members, one of those you'll hear from tonight, and Jelly Belly, who sponsored our keynote speaker and videographer for the symposium. It's an honor to be here with you. Briefly, our foundation was established in 1953 by the first U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff, General Toohey Spots, and we're dedicated to preserving the history and traditions of American air power and space power. That magazine that you saw in your seat is a thing that we publish once a year. We hope you'll take it home with you. We conduct a book club every other month that is largely joined by veterans. And we have a War Stories event every other month that this last year we've been using to tell stories from the air war over Vietnam. And we hope that you'll consider joining us. I don't want to reintroduce everyone tonight, but I want to make sure everyone knows that 2 of our Lifetime Achievement Award recipients are here tonight. General Speedy Martin and General Ron Fogelman both received our award. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to the narrator to tell us about our 3 awards that we'll present tonight. Thanks for allowing us to do it here with you.
All right, as General Holmes mentioned, we have 3 awards that are being given tonight. So I'd like to ask John, if you join me up on the stage here. General Holmes, if you'll come back up too, please. So this first award is the Air Force Historical Foundation Best Article of 2022. Edward goes by Ted Young, deploying the Air Commanders and Air Command, Southeast Asia, and Alternative View, summer of 2022. Ted Young received a BA in Political Science from Harvard University and a master's degree from the University of Washington. He served 2 years in the Peace Corps, volunteer in Thailand. In 2015, Young completed a master's in history at the Warfare in King's College in London, England. Returning to King's College to study for a PhD in history and completing his degree in 2020. Now, Ted has written 22 books and monographs, which for those of us who can't even write, that's an amazing accomplishment. And military history. And his article offers a new take on the question of air commandos, air commando employment, but also to include an address on the important issue, namely the unity of command and command relations to joint and combined force warfare. For his outstanding research and innovative approach to the subject, Ted Young is awarded the Air Force Historical Foundation Best Article Medal for 2022. Ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Ted. Thank you. Congratulations. Our next award of the 3 is one that is the first annual Air Force Historical Foundation Book Prize to Major Daniel Jackson, United States Air Force. Title of his was Fallen Tigers, America's Missing Men in China During World War II. University of Kentucky Press 2021. Now, Daniel Jackson is a 2009 graduate of the Air Force Academy, is the author of The Forgotten Squadron, the 449th Fighter Squadron in World War II, and also Famine, Sword, and Fire, the liberation of Southwest China in World War II. Now, he is a China expert, obviously, and a combat veteran, a special operations pilot out of Herbert Field, and is now working on his PhD in the University of Wisconsin. He is fluent in Chinese, and much of his material comes from his research and lengthy assignment when he examined Chinese archives. His research work is unprecedented. His book is not just another Flying Tigers book, but is a very detailed story and history of the 14th Air Force, lost airmen and others in the China-Burma India theater. Of note, Dan received the Air Force Historical Foundation Student, interestingly enough, Air Power History Award in 2009 when he was a first classman at the Academy. So this is a trend he's doing as he goes along. So first-classman and a great researcher and excellence in writing, Daniel Jackson is awarded the first ever Air Force Historical Foundation Book Prize for United States Air Force history. Congratulations. Well done. You bet. All right, this next prize is for Colonel Philip Meilinger. I got to tell you that Phil was the BCT squadron commander when I was a dually. And he was the sweetest guy you ever met in your entire life. He would have counseling sessions, ask us how we were feeling and all sorts of things like that. Not. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about Colonel Meilinger. Received his bachelor's degree, of course, from the Air Force Academy in 1970, a master's degree from the University of Colorado, and earned his PhD in military history from the University of Michigan. A command pilot, he has served as a C-130 aircraft commander and instructor pilot in both Europe and the Pacific, and he also assigned to the Doctrine Division in the Pentagon for the Air Staff. Now, Colonel Meilinger was the Director of Military History, because he has his ties to the Air Force Academy, and Deputy Department Head of the Department of History at the Air Force Academy, and a Professor of Strategy at the U.S. Naval War College, and was the third Dean of the School of Advanced Air Power Studies. The Air Force's only accredited graduate school for the education of future strategists. Now, the SAASS has produced some of the most innovative leaders in the United States Air Force, including our foundation chairman, General Mike Mobile Holmes, was one of his students who attended SAAS during Phil's time as the dean. Now, upon retiring from the Air Force, Meilinger has not slowed down a bit. He's worked as a defense analyst in the Washington, D.C. area, and over 6 years in SAIC and Northrop Grumman. He has lectured at numerous military and civilian venues all over the world and is the author of more than a dozen books and over 100 articles dealing with air power, military history, their operations, and theory. Now, Phil Meilinger is the quintessential, yeah, it's one of those words. Quintessential, thank you. All right, I flunked again, okay? You're gonna give me a hard time?
We'll talk later.
You can talk later. Okay, Phil Meilinger is the model.
That guy.
Whatever that, quintessential, there we go, of what the I.B. Holly Award is designed to recognize. You know, when you look at what the conditions are, an individual who has made and sustained significant contributions to the documentation of the Air Force and Space Force history during a lifetime of service. The award is a tribute to his decades of writing, teaching, mentorship, support, encouragement to military air power historians around the world. General Holmes will now present the award, and Jana will take the award as Phil takes the podium. So please, congratulations, Phil. Even though you're a lousy VCT commander. And now we've asked Phil to say a few words.
Yeah. Yes, sir. First of all, thank you for that kind introduction, General Berry. Ladies and gentlemen, chiefs, generals, my darling family who was here with me, and my very dear friends in Chicken Hawks back in the day. Receiving this award is a great honor for me, and the reason it is a great honor is because I knew who it's named after. I knew I.B. Holly. Bill Holly was a consummate professional. Many of you knew him. Some of you, like Chief Fogelman, studied under him at Duke University. He was a slight, wiry, intense man who took his business very, very seriously. And he was a great teacher. After I got my degree and came back from Michigan at the academy, he was out there lecturing. And I sat down with him one day and I said, do you have any advice? Where do I go from here? And he said, I got 3 things to tell you, Phil. And he said, first, the most important thing you do is teach. That's what you do. That's why you went to school. Now it is time to impart that knowledge you learned onto your students. That is your primary responsibility, and never forget that. Second was the notion of service. That surprised me. What do you mean? He said, you're going to be called upon, your time is going to be called upon by so many people. You're going to have to review manuscripts for magazines and journals and books, publishers. You're going to be asked to serve on dissertation committees, research committees. You're going to be asked to be a referee to literary awards. He said, but most important, students are going to come up and hit on you constantly. They're going to want your time. They're going to want your advice. They're going to want to know what I should look at, what I should think, what research I should do. And most importantly, I suppose they're going to ask you to read things, read your drafts. He said these things are not always welcome, and they take a lot of time, especially the way Holly, if you know him, was in excruciating detail about these things. He says it's going to take your time, but you need to do them. That is part of your job description, and you can't shirk it. You must serve. And the third thing he said was, you have to write. It's not enough just to do those first 2 things. You've got to write. You've got to add to the body of knowledge. And he said that's very important because he said, great quote, if you don't write, you're not really a historian. You're just a reader. And that got me. So I thought that was important. I've tried to take those 3 priorities with me over the years, and I've tried to hang on to them. But what is important and interesting to me is the Air Force Historical Foundation has got pretty much the same mission. That's what the Historical Foundation does. It teaches, it serves, and it writes, or at least it publishes. So I think that's neat, and I think it's gratifying and encouraging that they do that, especially this past year with the new leadership of General Holmes and John Doolittle and Dick Daso, good friends. And I think they're doing an incredible job. It's encouraging because, to me, airmen have always been reluctant to talk about air power. They've been reluctant to extol its virtues. And that surprises me in a way, because I understand it, because in this day where in this joint environment, you're not supposed to talk about yourself. You're not supposed to be parochial. You're not supposed to be talking about how things you have done. And yet, the Air Force story over the last decades has really been a great one. Took down the Iraqi army in Desert Storm. Defeated Serbia and liberated Kosovo using air power, special operations, indigenous ground troops. Liberated Libya, took down Gaddafi using NATO air power without a single loss of life from a NATO aircraft with air power, indigenous ground troops. In 2001, in Afghanistan, it captured Kabul, or took down Kabul 2 weeks before the first conventional ground troops even arrived, using air power, special operations, and indigenous ground troops. In 2003, it defeated an entire Iraqi corps in northern Iraq using air power, special operations, 1 brigade of regular troops, and indigenous Kurds. And finally, of course, it defeated ISIS using air power, special operations, indigenous ground troops. That's an incredible record. But we don't like to talk about it very much because it's not considered polite. And it's like Hap Arnold once said, the problem with airmen has always been, we make it look too easy. Well, I don't think it's bragging and being parochial. It's simply say such truths? I don't think so, because if there was a meeting and all the chiefs were sitting around the table and the president looked out and said, we've got a crisis, what can air power bring to this crisis? He's not going to look at the sailor, he's not going to look at the soldier or the marine, he's going to look at the airman. And that airman better have a good answer. So I think education is a very important thing to do. My first book was a biography of General Hoyt Vandenberg, who was the Chief of Staff from 1948 to 1953. He was our longest serving Chief of Staff, 5 years. Towards the end of his career, he's getting ready to retire, and he was dying of cancer. And he knew that. But he wanted to go down to Maxwell Air Force Base to talk to the students of the Air War College because he enjoyed that. It was important to him. So he went down to Maxwell and talked to them. A lot of times what he would do is simply walk out there, take off his blouse, sit on the edge of the stage, and just talk. Because that's what he liked to do. That's the kind of guy he was. But anyway, he finished up his talk with these words. When you leave here, you should understand air power, and you must preach the doctrine. You'll be on staffs where you're going to meet people who do not understand air power, and you are going to have to educate them. You have to go out and preach the doctrine of air power and never get an inch on it. Again, I think that's what the Air Force Historical Foundation, that's what its mission is, and it's a noble task. To educate airmen about air power, but also, not just airmen, but the other services, our politicians, and the public. That is not parochialism. It is simple common sense and good policy. We must be able to provide sound advice to our leaders. The way we do that is by studying history and seeing through the eyes of the past what things worked and what things didn't work. Again, thanks very much for this tremendous honor. I appreciate it, and keep thinking air power.
Thank you, Phil. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our guest speaker tonight. He really needs no introduction, but I do want to, in the light of introducing the other was combat history for some of our distinguished visitors. General Fogelman has been and served the 15th Chief of Staff of the Air Force. His total time was 6,800 hours. His combat sorties, 315 sorties, 80 as a misty fact in the F-100. His combat time, 806 combat hours. He flew the F-100 in Benoit, South Vietnam from June 1968 to September 1969, 15 months. Tour dates were December 25, 1968 to April 23, 1969. He was shot down in 1968. Tells a great story about how he was rescued by a Cobra helicopter. He'd never seen a whole Cobra helicopter. He tried to climb in the Cobra helicopter because there's no room, and just hung on to the rails as they pulled him out and they were shooting. So he flew the F-4 on a second tour at Udon, Thailand, from April 1973 to April 1974. 16 months, 2 tours, Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross with 1 bronze oak leaf cluster, Purple Heart, Air Medal with 3 silver and 1 bronze oak leaf clusters. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce General Ron Fogelman.
I don't know what to do with this, but. So, first of all, I want to congratulate Wings Over the Rockies and the Air Force Historical Foundation for the symposium that they just conducted here. I know it was on a high level, and you heard Phil Meigner, a real historian, talk about how important that is. You know, I was a cadet from 1959 to 1963, and I was on active duty from 1963 to 1997. So I spent 38 years in the uniform, and from time to time, people would ask me, why did you spend so much time in the uniform? And I would say, you know, my background is in history, and I had no marketable skills. And so I was not, as Phil, a great writer, a lecturer, a researcher, but I'm a guy who appreciates history. And as a guy who appreciates history, as I relate it to other people, I try to give them a little understanding of the background and the rules of engagement. And you've got to understand that when I speak to you, that there's a difference between fairy tales and fighter pilot stories. Fairy tales start out once upon a time. Fighter pilot stories start out, this is no shit true. And so, hopefully what I am going to relate tonight is true. You know, I will start and talk a little bit, try to pick up from the end of the symposium through a theme that I would really encourage people to think about. And I'll end up with a little bit of philosophy that may make some people uncomfortable. Air power was not nearly as effective in Vietnam as it could have been. And that was for a variety of reasons. First of all, we had, well, there goes that speech. Somebody warned me about the blower back there. That's okay. The thing that happened was we had come out of Korea. The Cold War had heated up. We were buying equipment, doing things, and looking at Central Europe and all of that stuff. So the first way we were unprepared for Vietnam is we really didn't have the equipment that we needed to do the job. Secondly, we hadn't really thought about doctrine and tactics in terms of how to fight such a war. And third, we really didn't understand the threat. You know, we really didn't understand what we were up against. And the last one was we hadn't done a lot of training for that kind of combat. Now, when I look at the equipment side of the equation, you can start with just the aircraft themselves. You know, the Air Force eventually had to go to the Navy and get A-1s, so they had something to help in the search and rescue. We had O-1s for the FAC mission. We had F-100s, which I flew. We lost 242 F-100s in Vietnam. F-105s, really built for the European tactical nuke kind of thing. There were about 800 F-105s that were built. 344 of them were lost in Vietnam. And so B-52s, we lost 18, and that was primarily in the last days of the war. The Navy, the Marine Corps, they were flying A-1s, A-4s, F-4s, F-8s. But the fact of the matter is, we found ourselves in a situation where the effectiveness of air power wasn't just from the equipment that we had, but the fact that we ran up against what I like to refer to as sanctuaries that really gave the advantage to the North Vietnamese. The first of those sanctuaries was political. This was a war that the only way the North Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, could continue this war, logistics is really the heart of a war, was the equipment that came in through Haiphong Harbor and came down the railroads. And the U.S. leadership in Washington decided that we couldn't strike those targets. We couldn't strike those targets because it may offend the Russians, it may offend the Chinese. And so rather than destroy that equipment where it was concentrated, we allowed the Vietnamese to put it on trucks and start moving it south and across the Ho Chi Minh Trail and across the DMZ. And we found ourselves then in this big interdiction program. I was a misty fact. I flew a lot of missions in support of that. But the fact of the matter is, political sanctuaries really constrain our ability to do things. The second sanctuary that we ran up against was an integrated air defense system, where you had radars, you had AAA of all calibers, you had surface-to-air missiles, and you had MiGs. And in North Vietnam, the integrated air defense system was probably the most concentrated in the history of air warfare. At least, there goes another page. From, the beginning. I'm going to have to do something nice for that young lady. But another sanctuary that we had to face was night. We were unprepared for night. The only way we could operate at night was with flares. So we did flares in South Vietnam over special forces camps and things like that. We used flares over in Laos and the Ho Chi Minh Trail, etc. But night was a real challenge for us. And weather, there was the monsoon season over there and this sort of thing. And when the weather was in the area, we had nothing. We just canceled whole days on the frag with that. And of course, we were fighting in an area where we had jungle, and foliage was another one of those sanctuaries that we had to take on. But without all of those sanctuaries, when you go back to the beginning in the equipment, one of the greatest shortfalls we had was in the area of munitions. We had Korea where we had this tremendous exchange ratio with F-86s and MiGs, primarily with guns. And so when we found ourselves in Vietnam, when the war was over and we looked back, we fired 11 air-to-air missiles for 1 kill. That's how ineffective the air-to-air missiles were that we were using. In the air-to-ground arena, we were dropping 500, 2,000-pound bombs with iron sights, computing the windage ourselves and doing this sort of thing. Nothing new. Now, during the war, there was some progress made. We have a distinguished F-105 pilot here. We found ourselves in a wild weasel situation. And it wasn't just the military, but for those in industry, the industry people stepped up. And we did some amazing things to try and get stuff into the war zone. I remember when I was Misty Fact, and I forget the exact designation of this, but we ended up with a CBU that was a cluster bomb unit that was really good for killing AAA. You would drop this stuff and it would come down, it would make a donut, and it would kind of surround the AAA site. And somebody told me one time that each one of those things cost $6,500. Now, before I went to Vietnam on that tour, I had just bought Miss Jane a new Electra 225, and I had paid $6,500 for it. So every time I put in a flight of those CBUs, when they would ripple those beauties off, I'd say, well, there goes 6 Electra 225s, They were a little more effective than the Blizzards, but Blivids, but anyway. We did make some progress. There was some early laser-guided munitions. Laser-guided is good, but you got to have VFR conditions. We had some early versions of IR sensors and ground mapping radars and all that. But they were really in the nascent stage. So when we came out of the Vietnam War, I know that the concentration on this symposium was on the valor of the individuals. pilots, POWs, the support personnel, and you should never forget the wives and families that were left behind. There was a tremendous amount of that. So, for me, the real legacy of the Vietnam War was what happened in the next 15 years. Because during the next 15 years, the senior leadership of the United States Air Force and industry went to work to remove those sanctuaries. And so we saw all kinds of things come along. First of all, political sanctuaries will always be with us. So we need to live with that, but it is incumbent upon the senior leadership to make sure that as political leaders start to put restrictions into place that are going to undermine combat effectiveness, that they make their point to the civilian leadership. It's up to the civilian leadership to make the decision, but we have to explain what that really means. So there was a political thing. Then integrated air defense. We approached that through the use of stealth, through sensors, and by building air superiority aircraft and improving the munitions that went with it. We also, during this period, put into place some training, red flag training, WESUP, things of that nature. The night sanctuaries. We developed IR sensors, we developed things like the lantern pods, all of that stuff made us effective at night. Weather. Well, you know, it doesn't matter what the weather is if you have the coordinates of the target you want to hit. Because now we had GPS. We had GPS guided munitions. Foliage, we had millimeter wave radar and other sensors. And then we had a whole new array of air-to-air missiles that have come out that are very, very deadly. So the heroes, there were the heroes of Vietnam, but for me, a lot of the heroes that we have in the air power community that had really were the leaders of industry and of the military in the late 1970s and the 1980s. And some of those names have been lost to history, but I would tell you that they were guys like General Bob Dixon, Red Flag, General Bob Russ, General Bernie Randolph, Larry Scantz, Bill Creech, and even one that almost touches on some of us Academy guys like Ron Yates, people like that were in Systems Command. And so what was the payoff in all this? And the payoff was our performance in the first Gulf War. So we got to see air power as an effective tool of national strategy. People forget that as we spun up in that war, the United States Army ordered 50,000 body bags to be shipped to the Middle East. That's how brutal that they thought this thing was going to be. But an air power campaign, well orchestrated and well executed for 17 days, resulted in less than 200 casualties in the whole thing. It was an amazing success story. But in the end, somehow we like to concentrate on weapons and machines, and we really forget that the thing that makes air power most effective, the deciding factor, is in fact people. People. It's the members of our military profession. It's the families that support them. And our Air Force has tried to capture this with a set of core values that came about after the first Gulf War. We said, you know, excellence in everything we do is extremely important because we're in a very, very lethal business. Integrity is important so that your fellow warrior, the politicians, the American public can believe what it is we tell them about our capability. And finally, there is this thing called service before self. And what we're trying to do with service before self is this understanding that says, if you're in the military, you are dedicated not to your own personal desires, but to the betterment of the unit and the mission. So we all signed up, we all took an oath, support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, domestic, foreign, and domestic. But what a lot of people never talked about, and the American public doesn't really understand so much, is when you take that oath, you also ascribe to an unwritten liability clause that says, in the performance of my duties as a member of the profession of arms, a member of the military of the United States of America, if called upon to do so, I will lay down my life for my family, my friends, and my freedom. And it's no big deal. It's expected. It's part of being the profession of arms. The United States military exists to deter war. And if the deterrence fails, it's to fight and win America's wars. That's why your Army, your Navy, your Marines, your Coast Guard, your Air Force exists. Fight and win America's wars. Recently, I was at a situation where I made some statements where I said, services are not and should not be social actions agencies. And the United States military needs leaders of competence, of compassion, of character. And so I would tell you that I think that is what we're getting. And we should not be led astray by some of these arguments that are going on out there. You know, I suspect what I'm going to say next may be misquoted for purposes other than I intend. But even though I'm not a historian of the caliber of Phil Mulligan, as I have studied the history of warfare, I have never found a battle or a war that was lost for the lack of diversity. Never. On the other hand, I have found many conflicts that have been lost for the lack of competent leadership. Now, having said that, what I must say is diversity is extremely important. It's important to the military, it's important to the country. Because if you are a nation that we are, made up of diverse races and different inclinations, that's the base that we recruit from. And so what becomes incumbent on military leadership is to make sure that minorities and folks of other diverse origins, once they are in our military, that they are treated fairly. They are given every opportunity to pursue, prevail, and go up the command. That's the essence of what I talk about in diversity. Now, I was fortunate enough when I had a very brief tour on the Air Force Academy faculty to have the opportunity to escort a noted British soldier scholar. His name was Sir John Winthrop Hackett. Nobody out there knows Sir John Winthrop Hackett. Hackett, if you know, but how many of you have ever seen the movie A Bridge Too Far? Okay. You remember there was a beleaguered British commander who was there at the bridge too far, asking people to come, help, get me out of here, give me supplies. That was Hackett, John Hackett in real life. So Hackett came to the United States in 1970 and gave a lecture down at the Air Force Academy, and I happened to be his escort officer. And so this is my conclusion for tonight. These were Hackett's words, and I think it's what binds us together. And he said, for the military life, whether for a sailor, a soldier, or an airman, is a good life. The human qualities it demands include fortitude, integrity, self-restraint, personal loyalty to other persons, and the surrender of the advantage of the individual to a common good. None of us can claim a total command of these qualities. The military man sees around him others of his own kind also seeking to develop them, and perhaps doing it more successfully than he has done himself. This is good company. Anyone can spend his life in it with satisfaction. Ladies and gentlemen, you are good company. This is good company. Thank you.
We have one award that we want to be able to provide to General Fogelman, and this is a surprise for him. So, John has joined me as president of the Air Force Historical Foundation to do the following. For all those present, all who have served with or under the command of General Fogelman, there is one word that repeatedly and above all else describes his character and integrity, as you've seen tonight. On page 109 in your magazine, the Journal of Air Force Historical Foundations, that you can certainly take home tonight, but is an interview that does more than describe that fact. But it was in 1947 that the five-star General Hap Arnold wrote this about integrity. He said the following: personal integrity also means moral integrity. Regardless of what appears to be some superficial ideas of present-day conduct, fundamentally, today as always, the man and woman who is generally respected is the man and woman who keeps his moral or her moral integrity sound, who is trustworthy in every respect. To be successful, a man must trust others. And a man cannot trust others who do not trust himself. The president of the Air Force Historical Foundation, John Doolittle Hawks, presents the first Air Force Historical Foundation Medal of Integrity to General Ron Fogelman. Ladies and gentlemen. The only time I ever get to push around a four-star general. You're not leaving the stage yet. So if I could I have the ships here come up? So on behalf of us at Wings Over the Rockies, we'd like to just present this to you. Down in Durango, it gets a little cold at night, so here's a hat for you. And here's a nice jacket for you to bum around on the land out there. So, okay. So on behalf of us at Wings Over the Rockies, on behalf of the board, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
So tonight also we have a recognition I'd like to be able to make everyone aware of. For 14 years, 1961 through 1975, the Hmong in Laos, Special Guerrilla Units, SGU, and the Forces Army Royale, the FAR, fought and lost 35,000 personnel along with 727 American service members. Now we at Wings Over the Rockies, we're to join in thanking those who died and those who lived for their commitment to the noble cause of freedom and self-determination. So today, as the war intensified and our reflection on it, Lao Hmong SGU soldiers flew the T-28. That's the airplane you see out there lit up in a little purple color. And they served as a separate arm of the Royal Lao Air Force with training in Thailand. Over these many years that they flew, over 500 U.S. pilots were rescued due to the efforts of the Lao Hmong pilots. The National Lao Hmong Memorial Foundation now has a T-28, the one I just pointed out, that is based at the wings here, and will continue to fly, where the aircraft will continue to be flown for the purpose of raising funds, so we can honor that airplane at Westminster, Colorado, adjacent to the U.S. Armed Forces tribute gardens at City Park. And I'd like to recognize Commissioner Bill Holland and the Memorial Committee for setting this up. And also on your table is a label where you contribute to that cause. Bill, thank you very much. So we have another surprise that we'd like to share with you tonight, and that happens to do with the history of one individual, Brigadier General Robin Olds. Now, General Olds, as a lot of us know, he was my commandant of the Air Force Academy, but his history dates being highly decorated and influential American military officer who served during the Vietnam War. But before that, he was born in July 14, 1922 in Honolulu, Hawaii. General Olds is renowned for his exceptional leadership and combat skills, and he was a triple ace with 13 kills in World War II and 4 kills in Vietnam. Some people attest that he got more than 4 because if he got 5, he was going to go home. A significant role in one particular action resides in history is the Operation Bolo during the Vietnam War. Now that stands out as a testament to his leadership and his tactical brilliance because Operation Bolo was a crucial air combat operation conducted in 1967 during the Vietnam War. At the time, the North Vietnamese MiG-21 fighters posed a significant threat, as General Bogerman mentioned, to American aircraft. And General Olds, a seasoned fighter pilot himself, was tasked with devising a plan to neutralize this effort. So General Olds and the fighter pilots in the attack fighter wing stationed at Udon, Thailand, came up with a brilliant strategy to lure the North Vietnamese MiGs into an aerial trap. He coordinated a mission that involved American F-4 Phantom II fighter bombers, imitating the flight patterns and radio communications of the slower, vulnerable American F-105 Thunder Chiefs and fighter bombers, who did an amazing job in Vietnam, but for what that day called for was a different approach. The deception successfully drew the North Vietnamese MiGs into a dogfight with the disguised F-4s. During Operation Bolo, Olds' leadership and tactical prowess were on full display. The American pilots, under his command, scored us a resounding victory by downing 7 North Vietnamese MiG-21s, and if it wasn't for the weather, it would have been a lot more successful than even that. The operation not only significantly weakened the North Vietnamese air defenses, but also boosted the morale of American pilots. Brigadier General Robin Olds' leadership and contributing to that effort at Operation Bolo were instrumental in demonstrating the effectiveness of innovative tactics in aerial combat. His legacy as a fearless and innovative military leader endures, makes him a revered figure in the annals of military history. Robin Olds passed away on June 14, 2007, but his impact on military strategy and aviation tactics continues to be studied and admired. Tonight, we unveil a bust of Brigadier General Olds in honor of his service, but also for all those Vietnam veterans who fought in the air and supported the air campaign in Vietnam. This bust will now reside as a permanent part of the Wings Over the Rockies collection. I'd like now to ask Jim Nance, come on up, Jim. Jim is the sculptor for this wonderful piece of art. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to unveil the sculpture for Brigadier General Robin Olds. Jim, please do the honors. Thank you, Jim. Now, as we come to the conclusion of tonight's festivities, I do want to just make sure that we also recognize something else that happened tonight. I know I always want to be respectful of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard, but tonight happens to be the birthday for the United States Air Force. Therefore, we're going to play, once again, the Air Force song, and all the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard personnel in the audience have to sing the song. I would like to ask the honor of asking General Dugan to please come up as a senior ranking officer tonight to come forward with Cadet William Chen. William, come on up. We have the senior and we have the youngest in the audience to help us cut the cake. Honor the 76th anniversary of the founding of the United States Air Force in 1947. So ladies and gentlemen, if you'll join me, please stand. Let's play the Air Force song and we'll cut the cake.
We know who the oldest is.
Here it comes. Okay, William, try and grab a sword to Grant Hogan. Can I do it? All right. I'd like you to both take that and read for me what it says on there, William.
Honoring aviators from all branches for their service, dedication, leadership, and sacrifice in the Vietnam War. We thank you.
Good. Now, John Dugan, with William, will you do the honors? Good. Strategically cut it right where it hurts. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the Air Force birthday. John Dugan, thank you very much for it. You're good. William, thank you. Best of luck. Good job, Mr. Rico. Thank you. Please take your seats. So in concluding tonight's events, certainly thank you to all the VIPs who were introduced tonight, especially our guest speaker, General Fogelman, the Air Force Historical Foundation, Wings Leadership, Marketing, Events, and the Exploration of Flight. We are one organization, two locations. This, of course, is the second location. There's no museum in the world that I'm aware of that has 15 acres on an airport where we actually fly airplanes, and we guarantee the opportunity for young people to realize what the art of the possible is. We give $250,000 worth of flight scholarships every year at $12,000 increments, and $7,500 for power, and $7,500 for gliders. We've done that for 5 years, giving away over $1.2 million. You're good. Thank you. Regrettably, we weren't able to get the jumpers today, but I do want to thank Rusty Lewis, John Braun, Gary Mancuso, and Justin Anderson, who are going to jump with not only the American flag, the POW flag, and all the service flags. So unfortunately, we were able to do it. But to Alan Cook and to Chris Murphy, our demonstration pilots today, thank you very much. To Lou Hutchinson, who gave us the 01 Bird Dog, which, by the way, we are going to fly here next week for the first time. And also Colonel Weed Tucker for the 140th Wing. He's a wing commander, goes by Weed, go figure, Jeremiah Weed. For the F-16 that we have out there, so thanks to the 140th. And the Vietnam Helicopter Pilot Association for the display and the helicopters that are on the ramp there today. Thank you. So as final comment, I would ask the award winners to please come up. We're going to have photographs with General Dugan and General Fogelman. And please enjoy the music and drinks that are left for the concluding of the evening. Thank you all for coming, for honoring our chance to be able to put Wings of Valor on the network and in our memory for all the great service done by all the services. Thank you all for coming and have a great night. Safe drive.